1st, 2005. The activity report includes 8 recommendations, 4 from Leisure Services, 2 from Information Technologies, 1 from Neighborhood Services, and 1 from Municipal Courts. Leisure Services memos were related to the deposit theft at Brimley Community School, processing of Leisure Services Oracle invoice payments, and the missing change fund at Doolittle Pool. Information Technologies memo was related to P-card issues. Neighborhood Services memo was related to a P-card compromise, and the Municipal Courts memo was related to a missing deposit. Management agreed on all 8 recommendations, and those recommendations will be tracked in our follow-up database. Any questions?
Was there any, Mr. Chairman, was there any disposition as far as the court case and the ITP card misuse?
That's coming up. We were scheduled to go on the 28th. We heard from the ADA yesterday that it was going to be postponed because somebody that was involved was not going to be in town. But it's coming up for the initial hearing.
I'd be interested, perhaps, Mr. Snelling, if you could, in your report at next meeting, if there's closure on that, I'd always be interested to see how the final court case went.
Yes, sir. We'll make a note of that.
Do we have any further discussion? I would entertain a motion to accept this report.
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. So carried. Agenda item 7, audit of the single-family residential rehabilitation program. We will now hear a report from the city auditor.
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, Nancy Beatty will report on the work that was done related to this audit.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman and Audit Committee. The City Auditor's Office completed a performance audit for the Neighborhood Services Single-Family Residential Rehabilitation Program. The Neighborhood Division, Development Division oversees the Single-Family Residential Rehabilitation Program. Community development, block grants, and home investment partnership funding are used to provide repairs to low-income single-family residents within the city of Las Vegas. The objectives of our audit were to ensure that current policies and procedures were established in accordance with applicable guidelines and management controls are adequate and operating as intended. The scope of our audit was limited to selecting projects active and are finalized during fiscal years 2004 and 2005 through 6. 10 project files were judgmentally selected. 4 of them were for community development block grants, and 6 were funded with home investment partnership funding. I would like to briefly address some of the more significant findings of the audit. One of the criteria used to qualify applicants for the program is to calculate participants' anticipated income over the next 12 months. In testing the income verification process, we found that anticipated income was not always used, not all income sources were verified, income from assets were not calculated, and research was not completed when source documents indicated potential income sources. Participants who received direct or deferred loans in the repairs of their home authorized their insurance company to add the city of Las Vegas as an insurance rider. However, follow-up was not completed to ensure that the homeowners' insurance policies were in fact amended. The contractor submitted 17 bid forms relating to these 10 projects. 9 of the forms were date time stamped before the bid opening time. 7 were not date time stamped, and 1 form was date time stamped after the bid opening time. Our audit showed various established procedures were not always completed, and required documentation was not always maintained. Management has developed action plans to address these issues, and these are the responses are found at the back of the audit report. Any questions?
When was the last audit conducted?
This is
previous?
This was the only one?
I believe it's
the
This
only
is the first audit that's been conducted. When will the next follow-up audit happen?
They'll be on the schedule. We'll routinely go back through. I can't remember if this one was assigned as high risk, medium, or low risk, but I have a feeling it'll go to high risk. And so we should be back in there within a couple of years, 3 years maybe,
Or less.
or less.
The recommendations indicated from management's plan of actions that they have responded and would have an estimated date of completion as of September 1, 2006. Have they put in place?
I did talk to the gentleman I was dealing with in the audit, and he indicated yesterday that they have implemented them. We haven't set up a time yet for me to go down and verify the implementation.
Can we get an implementation program from them, an actual program of procedures that they will be following, like a checklist? Let me pursue this just briefly for a moment, and let me acknowledge that Councilman Weekly has just arrived. One of the things that I've been working on with Councilman Weekly for some years now that hasn't quite come to fruition is additional funding that's anticipated to come to the city, to the county, and to the state of Nevada through nonprofit organizations. And Steve, that's something I'd like to follow up with you outside of this meeting because it has nothing to do with this. We have a series of folks that are out there that have set up a qualified 501c3 organization that would be looking for the funding needs of the particular, if you will, government unit. As part of their criteria, checks and balances are extremely important. This could potentially be an additional source for this city. In order for it to be a source for this city, this report, very well done, is a key factor. If this does come to fruition the way that it's anticipated that it may, checks and balances mandatorily have to be in place. This cannot be, as some of the other agencies within the city has done, put it off for many, many, many months because they don't anticipate seeing in the foreseeable future the audit cycle is 3 years off. A spot check versus a full audit or a full internal compliance check may be appropriate at some point in time for that specific reason. Out of 223 tax-exempt organizations, roughly 150 have lost their tax-exempt status for improper use of funding for low-income housing, HUD, and other affordable housing. Part of that compliance, part of what caused the compliance issue is the fact that the municipalities themselves did not have the proper controls in place. So I welcome this report. I welcome the findings that have happened here. What I'm suggesting is that sooner versus later, this program item I suggest should be in place as further consideration. Is there further comment on this? Councilman?
Mr. Chairman, just for clarification, throughout the reporting today, we have management responses and plans of actions, estimated date of completion, in this case mostly in and around September 1st. We're almost 60 days out from that. Should we not get something on the record as far as, you said they're going to submit something back to the audit office, but I'd like something a little bit more concrete. So we'll have, this is under yours, Steve. Do you want to step up and get on the record? This may be your first. It certainly won't be your last.
Steve Harson, I'm the Director of Neighborhood Services.
And simply to clarify, the gap between the estimated date of completion when this report was prepared and what you've done officially back to the audit committee. I'm sorry, the audit.
Again, we met with the auditors department. We took the recommendations. We have actually implemented everything that they did bring forward to us. We can provide the documentation that would help to the committee so you can actually see the steps that we did take as far as application changes, tracking changes, and things of that nature.
I would certainly like to see that, Mr. Chairman, because it's kudos to staff, kudos to the audit department, and it just gives us closure so there's no lingering questions or dates out there.
I would appreciate that. Please so produce them. And Brad, I'm assuming then you will provide a copy to each of the committee members as well.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, I'll do that.
Thank you.
What kind of time frame until we can expect that then?
I
I can get it to the auditor's office by the end of next week. With the holiday this week, I'll get it by the end of next week.
Thank you.
But let me, and this may or may not have no bearing here, I have a true passion for low-income or affordable housing, and I have a passion for what it means to this community. And my passion is further extended into other organizations that are hopefully willing to step up and share resources. And I think, Steve, this is a good step in that direction, because as any agency or entity goes, that funding becomes very important. And I think, Nancy, your findings here are well-founded, and I truly appreciate what you've done. Are there any additional comments on this report? If not, I'll entertain a motion.
I move to approve.
Is there a second? All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you very much. Item 8, annual audit recommendation follow-up as of June 30, 2006. We will now hear the report from the city auditor.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Bonnie Mosick coordinated this report, and Bonnie will first give a general report, and then we will discuss the remaining incomplete recommendations.
Good morning, Chairman and committee members and meeting participants. The City Auditor's Office completed the annual audit recommendation follow-up as of June 30th, 2006. There have been 942 audit recommendations requiring corrective action by city departments since January 1st, 1999. The charts and tables summarize the status of the audit recommendations in total. The objective of our follow-up is to ensure that audit recommendations are being appropriately addressed by city management and to track the status of the recommendations. Much of the benefit from audit work is not in the findings reported for the recommendations made, but in their effective resolution. City management is responsible for addressing audit recommendations. This follow-up is a process to help management fulfill this responsibility. The status of each audit recommendation is identified by using the classifications of complete, which is the recommendation has been implemented or some other action has been taken to effectively correct the deficiency. Incomplete is the recommendation has not been implemented. Extended, the recommendation has been implemented due to circumstances beyond the department's control. Not due, due date identified by management has not passed. For each audit recommendation, city management provides an estimated completion date. An audit recommendation is classified as being not due until this date has passed, and then the audit recommendation becomes incomplete or extended. While city management has made progress toward the implementation of the audit recommendations contained in the various reports, additional efforts should be made in finalizing incomplete recommendations. An audit recommendation remains in one of these classifications until city management completes the recommendation and notifies our office. Subsequently, audit staff obtains and evaluates evidence supporting management's representation. If the evidence demonstrates that the recommendation has been adequately addressed, the auditor identifies the recommendation as being complete. Upon releasing this report on August 29, 2006, the chart indicates that there were 26 audit recommendations that were classified as incomplete.
Mr. Chairman, let me add something on this. It kind of goes back to the question you asked just a moment ago relating to follow-up. What we did last year, usually the number of incomplete recommendations over the last several years has hovered around 100 to 150, somewhere in that neighborhood. And the reason it's down so far is because of some of the advice and counsel that you gave us, and also working very closely with the city manager's office. Starting last January, we started providing every 2 weeks a list of audit recommendations that were incomplete, that were open. And the city manager's office worked diligently with the departments to have those cleared. And as Bonnie talked about, the process is that once the department feels that it's cleared, they notify us, and then we go out and do a review to see if the changes or the actions taken remediate the problem. And then if it does, then we'll come back in and we will we'll clear that at that point in time. So we anticipate that we're going to start again after the first of the year, sharing with the city manager's office every 2 weeks the audit recommendations that are still open. Remember, this is a snapshot in time as of June the 30th last year. And at that point in time, well, then we had a number of them that were still open. 26 specifically. And remember the classification of those. If you remember, you have the extended and you have the not due. The not due because of the due date, it just hasn't passed yet.
Mm-hmm.
The extended, this was on your recommendations. The extended became a category where the department really couldn't clear the recommendation because of some circumstance beyond their control. So we focused in on the incompletes. At this particular snapshot in time on 6/30/2006, there were 26 incompletes. Since that time to this date, 10 have been cleared. So that drops it to 16. Additionally, in the last week, we've received notification that 4 more have been complete. We just have not had the opportunity to go out and review those. So what we'll do is we'll probably review only 12 recommendations at this meeting, because the other 4 quite possibly have cleared. What I'd like to do, we've got them set up so that they are done by department, and what I'd like to do is look at those individually, and I'll give you a little bit of background, and then if you have any questions, you're certainly welcome to ask.
Okay, before you get to that point, I apologize for interrupting you. When was the last time you saw the outside auditors for the city?
The outside auditors, they were in, and I had a meeting with them in, it was this spring, was the last time I saw them.
Did you go through, similar to what we have laid out, what Bonnie has laid out here, did you go through this chart with them on the internal control reviews, the incompletes, the extended, and et cetera?
We have supplied them with, or they're supplied either by us or through finance with copies of everything that we produce.
Because a couple of years ago, if memory serves me right, you were kind of the person that they did not get in contact with. And there was substantive work that has been performed by the internal auditors in areas that they should be probing into that would allow them, as far as their final report is concerned, lend towards a much cleaner statement. This is a true compliment to the city, this report today. An absolute compliment. The reason I'm raising the outside auditors is because clearly the outside auditors, from my perspective, should be quite impressed with what the city has done, what they've accomplished, what the reports and what the findings are, and how the city has followed through with recommendations for improvement. And it's a compliment to the entire city itself. It's key to me is in putting on an auditor's type hat that they also be in contact with you again, so that you can also advise them what has been cleaned up through, at least through your perspective as the city auditor, because I believe it has a bearing ultimately overall in the city and the city's rating. In fact, I know it has a bearing in the city's rating. So once again, with what the various department heads have done, this is absolutely excellent. It's just that they need to be aware of this as well. Thank you. Go for it. Sorry. And I'm not running for office, if that's what you're wondering. I'm telling you, from the first day I've sat on this committee, to today, I am truly impressed with your city. Absolutely impressed with all the accomplishments that have taken place and the teamwork that happens here.
You just go on a tangent every now and then. It just
You know,
Dare.
it's because I miss you. Brett?
The first department that we'll review is field operations. These three recommendations relate to an audit of Durango Hills Golf Course, the golf course management contract. The first one has to do with sales tax collections and remittances. The sales tax was mistakenly paid by the contractor to the state. We asked the project manager to request a refund of the sales tax overpayments. In our recommendation, we asked we stated if the contractor fails to obtain a refund from the Department of Taxation, the project manager should require the contractor to reimburse the city for the sales tax overpayments. The project manager requested city attorney guidance on this issue, and the city attorney's office is reviewing this issue and on how the city should proceed.
My question is just for time frame. I mean, it seems like this ought to be relatively quick, or could they give you a credit toward other things coming forward? Have we discussed it with them, or why the city attorneys? That's my question. I just normally call somebody up and say, we did wrong, can we, with the tax people and just correct it? Maybe isn't that not the right way to do it?
Well, Mr. Hawkins is here today. He may have something to add to that. I know that we were following this for a while, and it's been a while since I've actually been involved in this one. I can't remember if there was any result of them trying to obtain the refund, but I can tell you this: the amount of tax was about $100,000, which is about equal to their management fee. So if they were to reimburse us, they would in effect work for free for a year. But he may have some additional input.
No, that's correct, Brad. And John, I don't know if you know any more status of what's going on with the city attorney's office. The other issue was if we were, I'm sorry, I'm going to get on the next one there on the sales tax, but I think you're right, Brad, is where we're at.
Councilman?
Brad, refresh our memory. The contractor mistakenly paid the state with their money or with our money?
Well, this is somewhat of a complication. We have set in our the fee structure, and they collected what the fee structure was, which is what they agreed to remit to us. Well, what they did is the contractor backed into the tax. They took part of our money and remitted it to the state as sales tax. So that's where we come up with the idea of trying to get the money back, because what they did is they reduced the amount that should have come to us and gave it to the state as sales tax.
But they were the pass-through. It was our money we were collecting.
No, they were collecting the money, and what they should have done is they should have passed it to us, and as it was, they passed part of it to us and remitted some of it to the state. And we're just asking for the part that they sent to the state back to us.
They were, Councilman Brown, they were under the assumption that, for example, if they charged $20 for for someone to play golf, that sales tax was included in that. So whereas that really, because of us running it, there didn't need to be sales tax in that. But with some of the other people that this company manages throughout the country, that's the way it's already included in there. So they went with that same assumption, took the, say, down to $19, submitted that other dollar to the state.
That's all you're going to ask? Then I'll ask, why don't they just amend the sales tax report? It's a simple process. Why are we waiting for the city attorney to come back and say to them, amend your sales tax report, submit it? Because the state is not unaccustomed to receiving amended sales tax reports or use tax reports.
And then discuss it with them. We've seen them be very open in the past.
That I can't answer. We did make an attempt. I'm not sure what the contractor did, but I know that we went to talk to them about getting a refund back to the city, and the state sales tax was of the opinion that we weren't the taxpayer, we didn't remit it, so we can't ask for it back.
Okay. But the remitter can file, should be, I'm not going to say can, should be able to file an amended sales tax report. And I guess I would ask the city attorney's office here, why hasn't that happened? Why aren't they just asked to amend their sales tax report and bring this to closure?
I can't say, and I'm worried about something that Brad just said, is that the view of the department may be that we weren't the taxpayer.
I see.
If you consider what Bill said, I can imagine the State Department of Taxation saying, you've got 5,000 citizens out there who paid us $1 because your true fee for a round of coffee is $19. We don't owe you anything. Bring us 5,000 names, and we'll give them their buck.
Okay.
So they played that game with
Previously.
us before.
I see.
And I will talk to Mr. Sebo and find out from Mr. Hogsness after the meeting and update you on the exact status, but that's my guess. That's why they're being difficult.
This is one issue that we did talk about. I mean, this came up in the discussions. And if we would have collected the money from 5,000 people, well, then I think we would have a major problem because we would owe the 5,000 people. We actually collected it and remitted it, and they're the ones who actually paid it. But as it was, since they backed into it, well, then, and reduced the amount of money that should come to us, we were of the opinion that they owed us the money back. They did owe us the money back instead of 5,000 people who played golf at $20 a round, because the stated fee was $20 a round.
Because they got consideration for that. So they were satisfied. It was our money. It was just the city's money that went there.
Well, I'm not trying to diminish Mr. Redline's point, but we did kind of go through that logic, and I don't know if our logic is correct or not, but that's where we stood on it.
Okay. Well, I'll work it with staff and have an answer for you before the next meeting. In that case, we wish you well.
The next item has to do with sales tax for purchases. Durango Hills Golf Course has not been taking advantage of the city's tax exemption in its procurement activities, and in fact it may not be eligible. So our recommendation was for the project manager to consult with the city attorney's office on this issue. City attorney's office has been working on this item, and it went to them on May the 31st of 2006. This May.
Well, we should start something right now. Again, I'll check with staff, find out who's on it, and get them going, or take it over myself.
Can I raise a point on this, and it quasi has a bearing on what happens here. Our function is for internal auditors to identify issues, but not to provide the resolution, and we understand that, and we understand the city attorney is working on this. I mentioned to somebody prior to the start of this meeting, I sit on a couple of other governmental boards, and the one thing that we've always been sensitive to is the nature of the contract that we have with the service provider to provide for the exempt status for sales and use tax. As part of the internal audit function, was the contract looked at? Was there an exemption clause that was included within that contract? Or at this point, is it time so distant we don't recall?
I might be able to answer that.
Okay, go ahead, because I wasn't the auditor.
Mr. Benson's purchasing squad is the one that worked up the draft of this, and I did all of the rewriting for them when we engaged this outfit, and I have pretty specific recollection that it was in there, and part of their performance is that they were to take advantage of that status.
Okay.
So if they haven't been doing it, that's their mistake, and again, we'll let you know where we're at on it.
Okay, so when I see here, Brad, that they may not be eligible to take advantage of the city's tax exemption status, it would suggest to me that maybe the internal audit staff should have looked at the contract to see if they were entitled to. And I like the word may because nothing is certain in this world. Is there any further discussion on this item? Brad?
Okay, the last item on field operations has to do with property tax. The city did not anticipate that Durango Hills would be subject to property taxes since the golf course was built and owned by the city. In fact, they have been presented with tax bills from the taxing authority, and the recommendation on our part was to seek a formal resolution on the tax exemption status from the city attorney's office, or get an opinion from them. And once again, that one went up on May the 31st.
Do we have a status update on this one?
I've heard nothing about this project coming to my office. Again, I'll follow up on it.
Mr.
My understanding is that they think that we owe property tax on this city property because we've got the operator there who's a private operator.
I think their logic was that it's a private operator and they're doing it for profit, and therefore we owe property, or they owe property tax.
Mr. Vincent?
Yeah, Mark Vincent, Director of Finance and Business Services. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I can shed a little light on this. The city attorney did do some research for us and did bring it back up. The discussions that we had early on with the assessor was that we thought property should be exempt. And the assessor felt that it was possessory use interest. They got an opinion from a deputy district attorney who represents the assessor's office that said that we should be taxed. We, as a result of the audit, have questioned the logic of that opinion. In fact, one of our deputy attorneys, Terry Poncello, prepared a letter. Actually had a legal assistant. John's not a legal assistant, it's a legal intern. Had a legal intern do some research, prepare a letter back to the district attorney's office. The district attorney's office received the letter but refused to acknowledge it because it was written by an intern. And so where we stand today is I think Terry is going to redraft the letter under her signature back to the DA. So that's the stand.
Okay. And I don't know if it's permissible for you to pass notes, but I just passed a note to the city attorney. There is precedent set with respect to a couple of other quasi, if I could call them that, quasi entities in this community that have received exempt status. And I'm aware of one other one. What I'll do is I'll provide that information. I do know specifically in one case on the board that I sat on, I was the one who made the formal request for the opinion. And we actually received an opinion from the Attorney General's office at the state level on that one there. So maybe there's additional information that can be pursued with respect to this.
Yeah, this just is troubling to me because I understand precisely if we had leased this land because we had no use for it and the developer was operating a golf course, putting all of the profits in his own pocket, who cares how the deed is recorded that it's our property? But with this arrangement, every nickel worth of fertilizer that's purchased out there comes from Mark Vincent's checkbook, and every penny that's taken in this early place around the golf goes into that account. It's ours. We've simply hired a guy to water the grass and mow the grass. And he is making $100,000 a year for doing that, but he doesn't have any interest in the property. Should be easy. Should be an easy one to rectify.
This is just wrong.
Councilman Brown.
Do we pay property taxes at Muni?
No, we do not pay at Muni. However, we do reimburse, because the situations are different, we do reimburse for property taxes at Angel Park and Desert Pines.
And I can see the difference with those two courses, but if we're not doing it at Muni, I'd be interested to see if we could find out if Desert, what's the county's? Desert Rose? Desert Rose, the county public course, if the assessor, the county assessor came up with the same finding for property tax.
Okay, thanks. We'll definitely check it out.
And then, and finally, do we have to pay them?
We have been paying under protest.
Big
since
bold
the inception.
protest?
Yes.
I'd say, I don't know if it's legal or not, John, but I'd just say stop paying them. Let them come after us. I've heard, not just on this one, but it seems that paying in protest and getting the assessor's opinions and AG's opinions, they still take our money.
We do have a good relationship with the assessor, and the assessor does lien property for our benefit and collection of other revenues, so we'd like to preserve that good relationship. I think it's a matter of we get the right attorneys to to deal with the district attorney when he turns around. It just, I
As
was
long as we're-
astounded that they wouldn't respond to the letter written by a legal intern. That just blew me away, but they wouldn't respond.
Then at least I would be interested in finding out if the other courses are being treated equitably.
Do we have any further discussion on this matter? Brad?
Henderson and North Las Vegas also have municipal courses, as does Boulder City. So there has to be some precedent out there. I'd be saddened to think that we're the only one paying. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Councilman. Mr. Snowden?
The next department is Finance and Business Services.
If I, Brad, excuse me, Mr. Chairman, if I could, just to get closure on that, then John, you have a triple header for the next meeting as far as those three to come back and either your presentation or part of Mr. Snelden's report.
Right.
Thank you.
Thank you.
There's two findings related to the park enforcement and collections audit. First one, improvement of management reporting. The second, delinquent parking citation collections program. The first one is one of the four that we have been notified that is complete, and we need to take the opportunity to go out and review that to see if it is cleared. So that first one is pretty much done until we'll consider it done until we go out and find otherwise. The second one, under audit of parking enforcement and collections, is the need to formalize and documentation of the city's delinquent parking citation collections program. The city lacks a formal parking fines collection program. This recommendation requested the establishment of a formal parking fines collection program, including the use of an automated case tracking system. On April the 3rd, 2006, audit verified that an automated case tracking system, the Cardinal system, had been implemented, and the collection agency is now being used for some of the outstanding cases. However, the overall collection program still needs to be formalized and documented, including identification of who will work with cases, how often, and the timing of submittal of cases to the collection agency. Staff acknowledged these deficiencies and the need for more formalization to the collection process. Candy Falder on last week on November the 16th marked this item as being complete because of collections officer being hired. The hiring of a collections officer is only part of the issue. What remains is the implementation of a formal delinquent parking fines and penalties collection program.
Do we have any questions on, comments on that?
What's the status of the automated collection program, IT?
For the record, in Mark Benson, Finance and Business Services, we have implemented the new Cardinal system, but I'm not sure that we are fully up to speed with all of its features, but we, with respect to using it for the collection process, we are. But Brad is correct that we probably have work to do in terms of formalizing the collection process, in terms of proceduralizing it.
What type of dollar amount are we talking as far as?
We're talking hundreds of thousands of dollars. It's kind of a statement of a year. I mean, it's significant. On an annual basis, parking fines are about $1 million or so a year, and a good portion of those do go to collections. We're probably talking several hundred thousand.
Will this be on our next agenda as well?
The issues that we're talking about here, if you would like us to bring them back, the ones that are still left open, we can bring them back and see if we can't get them resolved on the next agenda.
What was the date on this report originally?
It was released June the 30th.
Of 2006.
2006.
So it's still current.
Yes.
So I think we need to get Mr. Vincent and his staff time.
And we'll mention also.
Oh, I'm sorry. One thing I will tell you, the original report on that was, the follow-up report was June the 30th. The original report was September the 27th, 2001, so.
Maybe we don't need to give you that much more time. Can we have it reported in our next quarterly meeting, please?
Vicky, can I ask a question real quick?
Yes.
Just here on this page here, Mr. Snyder, where it just talks about 73% of the outstanding balances relate to parking citations issued to vehicles with Nevada license plates. But think down at the bottom here where it says, due to current city ordinance limitations, parking enforcement officers are not able to routinely crack down on individuals with multiple outstanding parking fines and penalties. Is there any way, do we work at all with the state and DMV? Do we have a relationship with them that maybe that would be able to assist us with cracking down on that? Because, I mean, if we're looking at here at where you have a cause where it says management has not made collections as high of a priority as needed, I mean, is that because we don't build relationships with other municipalities or entities to help us in that process?
Mr. Vincent may be able to answer that. Specifically, though, we did institute a booting program where we boot the cars for repeated offenses. They have a criteria for how many times they've got a ticket, and if they hit a threshold, well, then they're booted. I'm not sure. Mr. Vincent may be able to answer the question about working with the state and other law enforcement agencies and other people, though.
I can do that. We do have a relationship with the DMV. In fact, our collection rate for in-state folks is very good, because what we do is we end up putting a hold on their license or their registration until they come and pay. So that's an arrangement that we have with the DMV. So it's the percentage of folks that either fall through the cracks because they don't come in and they're not legally registered or something like that is the issue, where they move out of state. So we do have a very good working relationship with the DMV. We do have access to their system to track these motorists that are Nevada.
Okay.
So I'm not exactly sure. I recall the exact issue in that particular time.
And Mr. Chairman, through you to Mr. Snelden again, what your explanation here on the cause management has not made collections as high a priority as needed. What's your justification and reason for that statement?
Well, I think it was when we did release the audit, and I gave you the wrong date. It was actually October the 6th, 2000. When we released the report, there wasn't as much emphasis put on it, but as a result of implementing virtually all of the recommendations have been implemented except for these two, and I think that has changed the priority of it. I think it has a much higher priority, and they seem to be quite responsive to it.
Okay, thank you.
One more clarification, Mark, on the chart, 1999 outstanding balance was 2.3 million. That's just on what's delinquent?
That would be a cumulative balance.
On what is outstanding. And then out of that number that's outstanding, do we have any track record as far as what percentage we usually recover on an annual basis?
I don't have anything off the top of my head, but sure we're gonna have to come back and report out so we can bring that data with us.
Is like 50%, do we get?
I will tell you that historically, the time that the auditors did this audit, the collection process on tickets was horrific, and it has improved significantly. So these numbers, even looking at them again a few years later, just astounded me when I looked at them. But it was good. We have again implemented a collection agency process. We've had collection officers. We've updated the system. So I can provide you some information at the next time. Percentages.
Additional discussion on this agenda item? Brad?
The next report, city investment, and the final report, Audit City Special Improvement District. Those three recommendations have been communicated to us by Candace Baldwin last week that they are complete, and so we will investigate those and if possible, if they're complete within the surveys. Otherwise, they'll come back as being incomplete.
Just for my edification, when someone says to you it's complete, they just issue a memo that says this item is complete, or
Well,
do they give you procedurally what they have implemented so that it truly is complete?
what we ask them to do is we ask them to notify us that it is complete and supply whatever documentation they can to support that. Then based on that, we'll go back out and talk to them and do some testing or whatever whatever it is we think we need to do in order to clear it. But we do ask them to give us as much information as they can. Sometimes, clearing a recommendation may require, there may not be anything they can give to us. In that case, they'll just notify us. We'll set up a time and we'll come out and do the review. But if possible, we'd like to have as much information as we can to do it.
Thank you. Any further discussion on that item? Next item, Ray.
The next department is leisure services. First item up is the cash handling at Dula Gym, and it's a policy is needed on collection and safeguarding of funds for non-city organizations. The Dula Gym staff was selling bottled water and holding the revenues for a non-city group that used the gymnasium. While this practice was stopped, the recommendation requested Leisure Services to create a policy addressing the collection of funds for non-city organizations. Leisure Services Management has shared a draft policy with Audit and anticipates finalization and approval of the policy by December the 31st, 2006.
Any discussion on this item? Once again, I think the issue here is why is this taking as long as it's taken, and why December 31, 2006?
The director's here, she may have some comments.
It's my understanding that this had to go through the city policy procedure, so it's going through the process of that. It has been submitted for approval, is my understanding. It just has to go through the rules of being here.
Question with respect to the selling of bottled water on behalf of private groups. Is that a sales tax issue?
I'm sorry, is that a
Sales tax issue? If you're collecting proceeds on behalf of private parties?
I can't answer that. But I can find out.
Could you please?
I will.
Yeah.
The practice has actually been suspended. We don't do that anymore. But if you'd like to know what we can look into that.
I just don't want to see the city exposed for collecting revenue on sales of bottled water, which leads to other potential merchandise that may be sold as well, like T-shirts. That my son-in-law bought one day, and there was no sales tax on it, so he was appreciative. Okay. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman,
Councilman.
not pertaining to this audit, but John, it brings up a question that is kind of off and on over the last few years. When these out-of-town groups come in and use our facilities, gymnasiums, fields, things like that, that are generating money that I think we take a percentage under our new fee structure, but is there any accountability as far as what tournament makes that much money, or and Vision Sports comes to mind in the basketball gyms, some out-of-town soccer tournaments at some of the fields. Do we ever track that money?
I think that the answer to that's probably that we write these contracts up so that we require some sort of assertion or affirmation of how much they make, because it's a perfectly reasonable thing to have fee structures where if it's the Red Line Family Picnic, we charge one rate. If it's Red Line Incorporated Company Picnic, we charge a different rate. And if it's the Girl Girl Scouts who are gonna have vendors out, we tell them that we'll take 10% of what you all make out. And we probably require that they give us some sort of affirmation of their total sales. The right to audit on something like that, I doubt if it's much written in, but it's possible. My guess is that we're taking their word for it when we're taking a slice. Do you know differently?
Councilman Mayor.
Please.
We've had this as an issue previously, Brad, to refresh my memory, and I thought controls were to have been put in place by Leisure Service and other agencies to prevent the avoidance of. And my memory serves me right, we had a specific report on that with recommendations and follow-up. This is not something that's new, and it's not, I thought at that point, if memory serves me right, that protocols and procedures were implemented. I just do not recall the stage what those were. But it sounds to me like they've not been implemented. If folks around in this room are not aware of what they are, maybe they do know what they are, and maybe we could have someone address that.
I mean, in the real world, it would be done all the time. It occurs to me that in Cashman Fields, we probably have events where we're taking a slice. And in that instance, I would assume that you would want something from an accountant that says, this is the take, here's your slice, and he's certified that it's accurate because he's reviewed the receipts.
Well, we had the issue, John, and you weren't here, the city attorney was here when that report was reviewed, if memory serves me correctly. And there were issues that were brought to everyone's attention that I believe he was, and I may be misstating this, so don't hold me to accuracy, but I believe that there were implementations that were to be put in place, both from the legal side as well as from the department side.
The report was the Mexican Patriotic Committee, and
That's
had
what
to
it
do
was,
with,
exactly.
I think, a Cinco de Mayo celebration.
And that was a few years ago.
And there was one of the findings related to that, related to the number of attendees there was. There was a two-tiered scale for who paid what.
Right.
And I don't remember exactly how the recommendation was worded, but the issue you're bringing up is a concern that we had. There was really no way to determine if we got all the revenue that we
Well,
that
and
we
if memory
deserved.
serves me right, and then maybe, Doctor, you can address this, but if memory serves me right, I think I addressed the city of Las Vegas Park that's up on Rampart, and I forgot the street, Vegas or whatever, and the fact that we were having folks coming in, and they were putting up their booths that were there, and it wasn't just Cinco de Mayo, there was other events that were being held, and what were we doing to be in compliance? And Mark, not to pick on you, but I think you actually addressed some of the issues back in that meeting. All I'm suggesting is we have reviewed this, we have had recommendations that have been put in place, and you may want to address part of this, but the one thing I specifically recall, if memory serves me right, as internal auditors, your responsibility is to go out, find, and identify. It's the directors and the department head's responsibility not just to implement the procedures on that specific report, but also in other venues, if you will, that they know that they have the same issue with. My question, I think I'm asking Brad at this point, and I'm not sure who I'm asking it of, have those procedures from those previous reports been implemented, or is it just that the department heads are waiting to have you come back out and say, oh, by the way, you never audited this before, therefore catch us when you get out here? And that's not the process we've been going through here. And I guess I'll defer to you at this point.
Barbara Jackson, Leisure Services. From my recall, Mr. Chair, especially with regards to like the Mexican Patriotic and other events, it's been my understanding within our department that we've certainly held the people to the rigors of going through the process of signing up for the event and holding them to their word of how many people and what type of things that they're going to do. We thought we had internally tightened that control, and I have no inference that that's not been the case. With regards to Vision Sports, our position with that has been simply one of a rental. They come to us, they rent the facility, they get the facility.
Okay.
There's been no slice of the pie, if you would, for the city getting revenues from that. That's been a strictly rental process of any of our facilities.
Okay. Council.
And we may have talked about this last time, Mr. Chairman, you may know, if there's a nonprofit 5013C?
C3.
C3? 3CPO.
C3.
Star Wars. Are they required on an annual basis to submit anything to the state as far as any kind of financial document?
Yes, my understanding with a C3, it's severalfold. Number one is that they have to notify the state of C3 status, so they receive their exemption status for sales and use tax purposes for the nonprofit. They're also required to have that on file a year ago if in the event they participate with another C3 organization. They should also be notifying that C3 organization of their exemption, if you will, with the sales and use tax. If that organization receives less than $25,000 in total contributions, there is no reporting requirement either to the state or to the Internal Revenue Service. If that organization receives more than $25,000 in any one given year, the only reporting requirement is to the Internal Revenue Service. The state then has access to all filings on the Form 990, so they can see who is in compliance and who is not in compliance for their C3 status. So there's not a separate filing with respect to contributions and disbursements by any C3 organization. That's kind of a general overview, if that helps.
That's why we invite you.
But you told me I was being released here shortly.
Not now.
This is a stretch outside the audit committee, but Betsy, if we could, at the manager's level, have some dialogue as far as these type activities. They seem to be growing. Certainly we have control over some of the special events, picnics, those type things. But I know that if it's a 25,000 threshold, some of these, even the nonprofits, are generating that on any given tournament weekend. And I'm not sure if we shouldn't be in a stronger position to understand what kind of dollars are being generated for at least an evaluation of cost recovery for us.
Yeah, it's 50,000, or no, you're right, 25,000, I apologize.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Any additional discussion on that item? But I need to make a comment directed at Dr. Jackson, and that's the fact she's done absolutely an excellent job. And I don't want anyone to feel, based on my earlier comments here, anything but that. Because when I first came on board here, at least, and when I started working with Brad, there was a lot of cleanup that was taking place, and she was one of the first to step up to the plate and really take care of her department. And I really compliment her for what she has done and what she has accomplished. So I apologize if it sounded as though maybe I felt otherwise, which is not the case.
Mr. Chairman, I'll reinforce that. Dr. Jackson has taken on the brunt of a lot of these recommendations, and their completion ratio is well above 90% now, and possibly even more than some of these. So I concur wholeheartedly that department's done a fantastic job.
And let the record show that Councilman Weaver is nodding his head yes.
I am, because I mean it's kind of for me, you know, when you see the reports, and you know, a lot of them are in centers in my ward, and so you know it's pretty disturbing sometimes to read some of the activities, but you know I do appreciate Dr. Jackson very much for being on top of it, as well as Mr. Tyler, because with Leisure Services and a lot of the growth that they have to deal with. I mean, when you talk about tournaments, I mean, and just speaking of that alone, I mean, we deal with a brunt of a lot of that, and it's tough. So they do they do take a lot of heat for a lot of things that happen, but we do appreciate them very much.
And Mr. Chairman, it's inherent. Their activities, their leisure service function, is far more exposed as far as cash handling and transactions. So I don't think the number is any indication of the department. I think it's just inherent of the service they provide, that they're going to be under that kind of scrutiny because of what they do.
Mr. Chairman, before I ask to be excused, I have another commitment to go to. May I say, as a former board member of a community school, probably never been more frantic, all the things that are occurring now, probably never better handled. So my concurrence with what was said in my apologies to have to be excused.
Well, if I say no to you being excused, will you say?
Probably not. After all, it's only a job, but I have to do it.
Please excuse Mr. Workman. Thank you, Paul. Mr. Snowden.
Okay, the next 6 issues have to do with internal control review memo number 19 on Stupak Community Center, which had to do with P-card use. The first item, the center coordinator misused the P-card assigned by purchasing items prohibited by department policy and other non-business purchases, such as health and beauty products, medications, bathroom accessories, kitchenware and appliances, and an excessive number of gift cards, and more. This recommendation requests that Leisure Services Management develop improved departmental guidelines on the use of P-cards. That is, fine-tune what should and should not be purchased with a P-card. Management agreed, but stated that the completion date was ongoing. We asked that a date certain be given, and on June the 28th, Leisure Services Management revised the expected date of completion to December the 15th of this year.
Do we have any questions or comments on this? Will the December 15th date be held to? Dr. Jackson?
I'm very hopeful. Barring no unforeseen circumstances that we can get it completed. That particular policy is a lot more involved. I have some other departments that I have to get sign off from in order to make that happen. My dear friend in finance being one of them, to get it done. But it is my hope to finish that one.
So, Mr. Vincent, do I hear correctly you'll be working with Dr. Jackson? Thank you very much. Just because I have a short memory here, as you can tell. What did Miss?
That's pretty good.
Did Miss McKinney, as she's been addressed in here, did she repay for the personal use of the P card to the extent it appears that
This is currently in litigation.
I see.
Should be in court within the next month, I believe, early
I
December.
see. Okay. That answers that question. Thank you. Any further question on this? Mr. Snowden, next item.
December 11th.
December 11th.
The second one has to, once again, with P-card. During the review of the P-card purchases, inappropriate purchases were not detected. This recommendation requests that Leisure Service Management provide additional training to staff on city and departmental P-card policies and procedures. Citywide initial P-card training is very general and not specific to departments. Additional training should help staff better understand the policy, procedures, and expectations of management. Leisure Services Management agreed with the recommendation and stated that this recommendation would be completed by June 2006. On June 28, 2006, Leisure Service Management revised the expected date of completion to December the 15th also. One thing is just to piggyback on what you said, this would be departmental review of P-card use by those who approve and review would be very good, especially in leisure services because as you said, it's different, and there's a lot more many more occasions to use it. One thing I'll also add is that, and this is something I reported on in the last meeting, we had a nationally known trainer come in and work with us on P-card issues or on approval fraud type issues. That person has come in once, and we're planning for another round of that to occur in January. So this will help to alert the approvers and the reviewers what to look for.
And John, I don't want to say something in place here, so cut me off if I start in the wrong direction here. But my experience in litigation cases, and when I participate as an expert, typically I look at pre and post for policies and procedures that were in place. for internal control checks. And I see here that if on both of these, if the expected completion date is December 15, 2006, should what Dr. Jackson and Mr. Benson is working on first go to legal for review before it's completed, or is discovery cut off and it's not an issue, but additionally were there sufficient controls from the city auditor's view in place that are supportive of the city's position that there may have been a misuse of the P-card. What I'm trying to say is maybe the documentation was in place sufficient for the internal controls, but let's not have completion dates here that are close to a December 11th trial date that maybe someone else's eyes should be looking at as well. And Brad, so therefore I suggest that if December 15th is not the right date, someone may want to suggest what the right date is to this committee.
Mr. Chairman, actually, this is a sentencing date. The trial is taking place already, or it was plea bargain. So this is a sentencing date. Generally speaking, Mr. Chairman, what we do when we work on these internal control reviews, we of course work with detention enforcement, and we review with them everything that we will put in to the report and make sure that it doesn't compromise anything that they're doing. So we make an attempt to keep our eye on that.
I misspoke, and Dr. Jackson, I was trying to give you some reprieve so you'd have a good holiday season. It's not going to happen, and it's city auditor's fault, not mine. Any further discussion on this one?
Okay. The third one has to, once again with P-card misuse. The supervisors who approved the center coordinator's P-card purchases failed in their responsibility as the key detective control over P-card purchases and this is a quote from city policy, review each P-card expenditure to ensure that the goods and services were necessary and for official use. The P-card misuse identified in the ICR would have been more timely identified if the supervisors had taken the time to review the items their employees were purchasing. This recommendation stated that leisure services supervisors should review each P-card expenditure to ensure the goods and services are necessary for official use as required by city policy. Leisure Services Management agreed with the recommendation and stated that they were already implementing. They further stated that the recommendation would be completed in February of 2006. On June 28th, Leisure Service Management revised the expected date of completion to December the 15th on this one also. One thing, Mr. Chairman, if I could add, one thing that I brought up in this I think is very important is the fact that because of the way, and I think Mark will probably agree with me on this, because of the way P-cards are handled, the primary and the best detective control we have are those reviewers and the approvers, because Mark's people don't have the opportunity nor the knowledge nor because of the volume they can't deal with it. So this is the critical point, is the reviewers and the approvers.
Unless I'm misunderstanding here, which includes the next P-card, next couple of P-cards, it appears that all of the dates are to be December 15, 2006, and
yes.
Procedurally the policies would appear to be similar. Is that feasible, Dr. Jackson?
I just like to say, I think part of this, and it's not an excuse by any means, I think part of this is an effort to fold everything into one fell swoop policy to then give the auditor and get the final sign off on everything. I don't think the implication for me is that the supervisors are not doing what we said we would do in February. Because I have a division manager here that feels the wrath that I put on the department in that regard. But I do think that we are striving to finish this off before December.
The policy, so that I understand this, almost appears to be a global policy.
Sure.
And it's implemented based on each of the respective centers, if I could call it. Yeah. Will there be a huge variation, Mark, from your view on these policies?
There shouldn't be. The issue usually comes down to with leisure services is because of the nature of the folks that need to have purchasing authority on a P card. It's much broader than you would see in a normal department. That's what gives rise to the opportunity and the problems. Our policy, as Brad indicated, is that the P cards are issued to a person in their name or the holder. They're not to give it out. They're accountable for it. But there is a reviewer who has to review and approve the transactions before they're approved for payment. That process is a first line check. We also have worked diligently to reduce the number of P cards that are out. We've had something like 24% reduction in the number of P cards that are outstanding as a result of even the fraud P card trading that was done by the person that rented it. So there is it's not just leisure services. The issue is throughout the entire city, but leisure is unique because they have a high degree of employees that are in either temporary or in lower ranks that I think is where some of the issue comes in terms of the span of control.
And there is, Robert Jackson for the record, there is a fundamental issue for board to finalize in terms of how we go about the procurement process. Not so much violating any rules, but the fact that we have so many sites and the need for that because we run longer operational hours than anyone else in the city as well. So it is unique to the nature of what we do and why our numbers will always reflect larger requirements for P cards than anyone else.
Well, and what I'm suggesting is we're at the redundant point here. We're repeating ourselves on each one of these issues on the P cards for each one of the centers. Can't we just embody them all as one at this point with the understanding that by December 15, 2006, it's the intent that the recommendations be fulfilled and policies come forward, but put on the record, if we could, rather than just rehashing the same over and over again.
And I think that's right. And I would like to, if I could, Mark Vincent, just support what Dr. Jackson said. We work very closely with her folks, and I believe that the actions that she needed to take, she's taken. The issue now is getting a final closure on a written policy and procedure to get that done.
Rather, you find with putting on the record then just the additional centers that are involved for P cards rather than us repeating this, unless there's something more specific that you feel that needs to be brought to this committee's attention?
No, we would hope that any lesson we learn, any hole we plug, any deficiency we find could be corrected, could be repeated. The correction could be repeated any number of times.
Right.
We'd expect a replication of that.
Yes. And so as I look at this, what I'm seeing here is with the exception of the Las Vegas Municipal Court, I'm looking at the procurement card issues at Stupak Community Center, which is in here several times, and there are several different issues that are here, but they all appear to relate to the P card.
Yes.
Therefore, we've identified the issue for the record. We've identified for the record the anticipated date of December 15th. Do we need now to go through the balance of those with respect to the P card? Forget municipal court for the moment. It's not part of it.
No, they're different variations, but they all relate to issues with P cards, supervision, review, approval, and so forth.
Councilor Brown.
One thing I'd also, pardon me, we are doing, as you remember from the list of audits that are open, we are in a P card audit at this time.
Great. On leisure services again?
I'm sorry?
On leisure services or on other?
Citywide.
Citywide, okay. I don't want you to feel like you're picked on. That is excellent. Councilman Ray.
I certainly support that, Mr. Chairman. Could we also emphasize a training component of that policy?
Yes.
Brad mentioned that they had a specialist in last year. If that could be formalized, I would encourage that to be part of the comprehensive submitter.
Well, I would like to make that recommendation. Is that a recommendation that
Is that
comes
for
from
new,
this committee?
is that for new P card holders, or is that for?
Or is that something that comes through finance?
This came out of the ICR 0194.
Mr. Benson?
Mr. Chairman, I was a little distracted on the voice.
I noticed that. That's why I called it finance.
I could tell.
Thank you.
A couple of things. P cards are always a concern for me. Just the breadth of the number that are out there, the fact that we're relying on individuals, a large number of individuals to execute their reviews and supervisory duties. We are doing a couple of things. We're, as you mentioned, currently doing an audit, and I expect that we will find some recommendations coming out of that we can implement citywide. We're also in the process of updating the system. We're going to a new system that's used by the state of Nevada that I think will give us better reporting, easier reporting controls. The easier we can make it on the reviewers to review and do their job, hopefully the better they'll do it. So we're working on that, and that I think is to be implemented hopefully shortly, if not before the end of the year, shortly after the start of the new year. So we've got that going on. While there's no doubt that an organization like Leisure Services and to some extent an organization like Field Operations are unique because they have people out in the field and they're dispersed and there are a lot of small volume, small dollars but high volume transactions that they make. We're constantly working on issues. How do we better control that and what can we provide in lieu of a P card process that would help them? There may be some procurement things that we can do that can facilitate their purchasing activities to remove the need to have P cards. We look at that as well. So I don't know if that answers your
Well,
question.
it kind of, because what I heard the councilman, and he may want to restate, is, Red, can we have a training session as you brought in a specialist previously, Councilman?
And I it was ICR 0192, and I didn't even see it up there, but additional training, I'd ask staff to at least evaluate in the management response some type of mandatory, because that seems to be a critical element of the whole P card system is, do these supervisors or those that are reviewing it and using it, do they know what they're supposed to be looking for or doing?
The training that Rad's consultant provided was just outstanding. It might have been a little bit long, but it was really outstanding. People that went to that came away saying, "Geez, I never knew. I didn't even know what fraud looked like." So, trying to extend that. I know that Vanetta Appleyard, one of the things that we did is we created a mini version of that presentation. So Vanetta had gone to that, and we were using that for our own staff, even in our own accounts payable operations. So that kind of training in terms of what your responsibility is, what fraud looks like, how to detect it, and what to look for was really invaluable. And we need to extend that to everybody that has any kind of fiduciary responsibility within the city, whether it be P cards or anything else.
Well, with the property tax we're going to save on the golf course, we can bring that consultant back and do the training.
All right, I come back to then the question. You said something, Red, you do. Martha said something, you do.
You know what? Probably
Is that something
at
Steve
this
does?
point, if Brad wanted to pass it off, it's probably something that the finance department should probably take ownership of and do as a routine process. I'd certainly volunteer to do that if Brad feels that that's appropriate. Sure.
Please do so, thank you. And if you could let Councilman Brown know the timing.
Yep.
And then I wrote a note to myself, but I'll ask anyhow. When that training occurs, may I be invited?
Sure.
Thank you. All right, that takes us down to the next one.
Yeah, municipal court. There's one issue on municipal court. A documented procedure needed for staff monitoring of audit trail reports. Audit trail reports generated by the court system are inadequate to review significant and unusual deletions, voids, corrections, and additions. This recommendation requested the creation of consolidated, user-friendly audit trail reports for a regular review by court staff to monitor deletions, voids, corrections, and additions in the case management system. With the recent rollout of the new system, the court now has improved exception reports. However, responsibilities for review of these reports and the timing of the reviews have not been documented. On July the 13th, 2006, court management told the audit that they would communicate this recommendation to their Policy and Procedure Committee for documentation and follow-up. At this point, no further status updates have been received from court management on the progress in addressing this recommendation.
Is there any questions or comments on this, Councilman?
Where's Mr. Carmody?
He's behind you.
Right here. I got your back. Thank you. I need covered. So, just, Mr. Carmody, if you could just give us an update.
Certainly. Jim Carmody, Administrator of Municipal Court. The procedures have been developed. They are being submitted this week. We understand that this cannot be completed until they have been provided, and we will provide them actually before the end of the month. So.
When you say the procedures have been submitted, they're submitted?
No, they haven't been submitted.
Have not.
They have been developed. We have not submitted.
I see.
So when we have those, then we'll be able to review that. I think everything except the formalized procedures is the only thing we lack on this one. So once we receive that, I think we'll.
I guess my question is, and if memory serves me right, that this is one of the first, not one of the first, but it was one of the litany of the first reports that came before me when I first came onto this committee. We have some extreme serious concerns, and I actually shared, if memory serves me correctly, some occurrences, some personal occurrences with non-family members as to what was happening with municipal court. This report goes back to September of 1999. We're now into November, almost December of 2006. A lot of cash passes through municipal. We had strong commitments at that time that procedures would be implemented fairly quickly. I guess my concern is, what really took place? Was this just another one of those occurrences where, okay, thank you, we've got it, we proposed to follow up, and then we just put it off for years, and is it really going to happen? And my second question to be at least addressed, Brad, is, and I'm not sure if it's from you, what corrections have been taking place for some of the obvious that was happening on cash pilfering, some of the other events that have taken place? And I recall the city attorney was in here, and he had some very serious concerns as well. That went back to municipal judges, and some of the exposure that may be directed towards them. Has any of that exposure been alleviated? You know, that's more than one or two questions, but in a nutshell, number one, why is it taking this long?
Well, the issues that are ongoing are issues that involve a case management system that's taken us 3.5 years to get re-engineered. And that system will not be completed until probably May of this year. We have been in process for almost 4 years.
May of 2006 or 2007?
2007. Yes. That's one piece. The procedures on Audit Trail, they have been implemented. In other words, we have been conducting audits on the issues that are addressed. What was not done was the procedures were not written and defined and passed to our auditors so they can come in and complete that process.
Okay, and I will respond this way, hogwash. And that's not a defined legal term, but I could give you a defined legal term to that if you would really like to hear it. Having written procedures is what allows the overview to take place. Without the written procedures in place, you don't have internal controls, checks and balances, which is what the city auditor has asked to happen. It doesn't take 5 or 6 years or 7 years in this case to have written procedures implemented. Absolutely not. So I think that's a poor excuse at best. And I'm not attacking you, I'm just putting this on the record. Second, I've been involved in municipal audits. I understand the process and the procedures quite clearly, and I fully comprehend at this point we're 6 years down the road and nothing's been done. There is no, without the proper implementation in place, people cannot be trained, they cannot be schooled, and it cannot happen. I would like a specific date, Red, when you're going to have in your hands these procedures. It's just been too long. And I have other issues that I would like to go back for my own purposes, whether it becomes an agenda item or not, definitely that I want to visit with you on for the previous report, because quite frankly, we were very concerned, and the city attorney was very concerned about our municipal judges and the exposures that they have. What has been done to correct those?
I am not aware of
Okay.
what you're talking about.
Therefore, I don't think at this point, having completed by whatever date by the end of this month, which is coming up pretty quickly here, have they really addressed everything that was in that original report? Brad?
They have.
Okay.
That all the issues that were in that particular report have all been cleared with the exception of this one.
And the safeguards are in place?
Ryan Smith, Senior Internal Auditor.
Thank you.
There are a handful of audit recommendations that are still outstanding that were in this original report, but they're system related.
Okay.
And they are recommendations that cannot be completed until this case management system is completely rolled out. And in defense of the department, a component of this recommendation we're discussing related to the need for better audit trail or exception reports. Until the case management system was developed to a point that they had user-friendly reports, the procedures couldn't be implemented and adopted.
But safeguards can be put in place, and I would suggest to you, even without the case management software, I disagree respectfully with your statement. Procedures could have been in place, written procedures that would provide the safeguards that we were looking for from that report. Software is a poor excuse for anyone not to have
Well,
proper
I will
controls.
attest to the fact that the audit trail reports were terrible. The audit trail reports were very difficult to deal with, and the fact is, I don't think those reports were even being used because of the lack of...
Well, if memory serves me right, documentation was not being followed. Cash was being put up on the table. We had video. You had video, Brian. You had video of people, so to speak, my terminology, not ringing up. And then next thing you know, there's no receipt being given to the person who's...
That has been corrected.
Okay,
And I believe that
we didn't have videos, or we may have had one video. I don't recall the specifics to that. There was supposed to be additional videos put in place to monitor the activities of
I'm
those
not sure,
handling
Mr.
cash.
Chairman, what period of time you're talking about.
1999.
Okay, that's prior to me. But I can tell you from 2001 forward, we've taken this very seriously.
Good.
And I want to go on record respectfully that we have not taken that report lightly. If you look at what was to be accomplished, we did not address this issue on the procedures, and we should have.
Right.
And I take responsibility for that. But Ms. Jefferson, who's our budget analyst, and myself have spent considerable hours and considerable time making sure that these deficiencies have been corrected. And I just want to go on record on her behalf to let you know, the committee know, that we are not taking this lightly, and we will not.
Great. And then give me a date. When will
I
this-
did, December 1st,
No, you said at the end of this month.
which is
That's
December
November
1st.
30th.
November 30th.
Okay, let me,
That's what
and
we
I would
did.
like for the records, because my memory is failing me here, I forgot the name of the person who was the Chief Justice or Judge or whatever.
Craig Gregory.
He stood in this room and he made absolute commitments that have not been fulfilled. That was not pre your time, I understand that. Don't make commitments to this committee that you're not going to live up
I
to.
don't intend to.
Because, and that's not directed at you, but the issue in there was the fact that there were events that were taking place. I'm just being
I
repetitive
understand
here. And those controls need to be in place. And waiting 7 years is too long.
You're absolutely right.
Absolutely too long. So
You're absolutely right.
December 1st, Raj, will that work for you? Thank you. And I apologize. I just, to you, I extend, and I look forward to seeing your report. But I would hope in the future that no one waits 6 or 7 years to complete the formalities. Councilman, you want to make a comment? No. Thank you. Okay. Any other discussion on this? Thank you.
Thank you.
It's pretty lively.
Mr. Chairman, if I could add one thing. One of the things that Mr. Comey that came up during that conversation was the fact that, and if you remember back the list, we had 26 incompletes that we reviewed. I'd remind everybody that there are a number of extendeds, and there are also a number of not due yet. And this was a snapshot in time. Some of those recommendations have become due, and we've added more to it. So it's an ongoing process. Although we can, at that snapshot in time, we're down to just about 12 that we need to look at as far as incomplete. Unfortunately for us, or not unfortunately for us, but we continue to add more recommendations. And so next year when we do an annual follow-up, well then I'm sure there will be some that will not be complete at that time. But, so just be aware that we continue to do reports, and we continue to have recommendations, and the statuses do change.
Now, and I understand that, and I appreciate the chart earlier that Bonnie put up, and I think there was, 26 that was incomplete, and then 10 that have since been completed, so it shows that the movement has taken place. Thank you.
And that concludes my report on this.
Do I have a motion on this report?
Move to accept.
Is there a second?
I second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Mr. Snelling.
Item number 9 and 10 are safety audit reports, and we'd like to put the two of those together. One deals with the safety cash counts, the other is the audit of safety payment collection controls. And the first one to Brian Smith and Bonnie Mosick were the two auditors that will review these reports.
Our office completed 2 audits of the safety program. One audit involved unannounced cash counts at safety sites, while the other included a review of payment collection controls. These reports, when reviewed together, provide useful insight into the condition of cash handling and payment collection controls in the safety program. To begin with, I'd like to give you a brief overview of the safety program. Safety is a before and after school recreational enrichment program provided in partnership by the city and the Las Vegas Community Schools. This program is held each morning and afternoon in the cafeterias at 65 elementary schools. There are approximately 300 safety employees that are managed by a group of city leisure services staff. The objective of the safety cash counts audit was to reconcile cash on hand to revenue records along with reviewing cash handling controls. In conducting the audit at 9 safety sites, there were no differences noted between funds on hand and recorded revenue. During the audit, there were 2 issues identified. Issue number 1 was cash handling practices. City cash handling policy and procedures were not followed. The recommendations to safety management were to enforce adherence to the city's check handling policies. For example, driver's license or identification number should be written on the front of checks received, and checks should be immediately stamped with the city's restricted endorsement, and change should not be given to parents. Manual receipt books should be assigned to each individual authorized to receive payments, and develop a policy prohibiting the retention of non-city funds by safety staff. The second issue was safety signage. A sign was not displayed informing customers of their right to a receipt. A sign was not posted to show the city's cooperation to fight bad check fraud with the Clark County District Attorney's Office.
Considering the number of safety sites that we have, like Lonnie mentioned, we have over 65. and the limited direct supervision of site leaders at these sites, there's an increased opportunity for skimming, which, as you know, is the theft of cash prior to it being reported. Therefore, it is important that strong payment collection controls be in place. Our second safety audit focused on these controls, and our audit included visits to 10 safety sites during May and June of this year. During these visits, we discussed payment collection practices with staff, reviewed reviewed payment collection controls being followed, and determined the number of children in attendance for which payment for that session had not been received. You'll see a summary of our findings up there in the second bullet point. During our site visits, we determined that while Safekey has a policy requiring prepayment for attendance at the program, many parents are not regularly prepaying for services. And per the site leaders, parents often want to wait to pay for the Safekey program until they get paid by their employer, or there are also certain parents that want to wait till the end of the week after their child has attended Safekey, since Safekey does not give credit for missed days. The following factors appear to have contributed to this situation: confusion among staff on payment collection policies, inadequate review of site payment practices, and enforcement of collection policies. During our audit, we identified inconsistent, incomplete, and conflicting fee policies, and this has led to confusion among staff on the interpretation of certain fee collection policies. We recommended that management evaluate and clarify its fee policies and update program documentation where necessary. We also found that the Safekey program lacks sufficient controls to prevent and detect skimming of funds. And in our report, we provided recommendations for leisure services to follow to improve the oversight of Safekey operations and reduce the risk of skimming at the Safekey sites. During our visits, we observed many children arriving without a parent or guardian as required in Safekey policy. These children were not being signed into the program by their parent or guardian. In addition to potential liability issues, it's difficult to enforce prepayment of fees without a parent arriving with the child. We recommended that Safekey management take measures to enforce the sign-in requirement. We also identified the need for improved documentation of Safekey's unpaid balance collection program and the roles and responsibilities of staff in the collection of unpaid balances. Now, at the beginning of the school year, Leisure Services staff has already taken measures to address some of the recommendations included in this report. I would now be happy to respond to any questions you might have.
Do we have any questions?
I just have one. What is Safekey?
Safekey, as Bonnie described, at 65 elementary schools around the city, it's a before and after day care and recreational program for the students.
How old is it, from 17 years down to kindergarten?
It's typically just elementary school. There are some programs, well, Track Break is a program for
So it's about 11th grade or 6th grade, 11-year-olds down?
Barbara Jackson, Leisure Services. I have Bill Tyler, who's my recreation manager. I'd like him to talk with you.
That is a 5-year-old program, 5 to 11, for the most part. And that's before and after school. The Track Break program is a different program than that. That's Safekey.
So it's basically just for the kids that are at that school anyway? So in case the parents don't come in, they just stay there until the parents come and get them?
That is correct.
Oh, just to keep them off the street?
Yes.
Oh, okay, thank you.
And it also provides the opportunity for that student just to go directly to school in the morning.
Mr. Chairman, just clarification. Now we have the full-time city employee in the manager, site manager, supervisory role, but the other employees that you referenced, the 300, those are traditionally the teachers, or I guess they are our employees from a liability standpoint. We pay them. But then,
actually,
I don't know how to differentiate. They're not our full-time, they're dedicated Safekey on-site employees.
Yes, they are. And they are employed by the community schools, not by the state.
And I just asked, and maybe is the oversight I can see, but is it the employee that's there checking in. That's not our supervisor or manager. That's the, and I think they're school teachers. I was told once that a lot of school teachers do this before and after.
There is a site leader that's assigned to each site, and the site leaders are not city employees, but those are community school employees, as Bill mentioned.
Or they teach.
But there is oversight of these site leaders by the city employees.
Not teachers. They're anybody.
There are
Not through
elementary school
community schools,
teachers
right?
that end up getting paid by the Safe Key program for their role as a Safe Key instructor or leader.
Bill Tyler, Division Manager of Leisure Services. We could have a collection of people that could be from schools that are working in the morning or in the afternoon. Could be school teachers, may not be. In most cases, they are not now. We don't pay enough for those teachers to take those positions, but we do have some people that are in the school district that work for us in the morning and afternoon.
But structurally, could you explain what part leisure has and then what part the community schools have?
Leisure has the part where we have supervisors, and then we also have recreation leaders. Those are city employees. They are responsible for going out and reviewing the sites and supervising those sites. The site leader that's on site is a community school employee.
And that open door, open school policy that we're going to look at for the last 15 years, we're going to take a look at that soon. I just feel our employees ultimately bear the responsibility for 2 tiers of employees below them. And it's inherent in this program that some of the issues that are before us on this, I think it's just that second and third tier employee that I don't know how we get consistency all the way down through. It's certainly easier as a full-time city employee for policies to be put in place, but getting them down into that second and third tier, that's a challenge.
Mr.
Having
Chairman,
seen them.
Maybe I could add just a little bit. We've had many discussions about, and you're aware as a part of the community schools retooling that actually Mr. Workman mentioned earlier. The city kind of asserted itself in a more aggressive role and active role in the community school service delivery system about 4 years ago. And as a result of that, we have somewhat of a bifurcated process that's been described here today, where you've got a level of city employee oversight as to the operations, but not that level of oversight as it relates to personnel management. And part of the dilemma for the city is that if we were to take over the entire function completely, from top to bottom, there's significant expense that will be incurred to do that because of the nature of our civil service rules, the nature of our own employee practices, etc., that a nonprofit such as a community school can deliver that service differently and maybe more cost effectively than we can provide it for ourselves. I think at some point it's probably incumbent upon the manager and the mayor and council to have a discussion about when does that system, the one we're in now, no longer work as efficiently as we'd like because of these kinds of issues that have been presented here today, where your span of control, if you will, maybe isn't as sufficient as you'd like to manage our risk, versus the cost of rolling all those individuals or the cost of that service delivery under the city umbrella completely. And that's just been something that we haven't addressed. And it's really not even related to Open Schools, Open Doors. It's completely related to our management process for delivering these services.
Barbara Jackson, Leisure Services. In addition to what Betsy is saying, another part of that has been just the sheer consideration of the money piece and how the money is actually handled. And in talks with finance about how to best securely get it offset, how do we do that? do we have armored cars come out, taking money outside, which the finance director hit the roof on, because, it's kind of out of the scope of things. We were successful, however, in getting laptops in how many sites?
30 of them.
In 30 of our sites, which helped us tremendously with the tracking process, because once people then used our system of registering people, they then had to commit, and therefore you had to have the accountability for the monies. So at least in half our sites, we were at least able to take that one step, but she's correct. The overall management piece is key here.
Mr. Chairman, can I add this as far as accountability and skimming, as far as money goes? This is an issue that this is why we were particularly interested in looking at safety, because we did have some instances. Frankly, when the money gets in the system, we're pretty good at catching any defalcation. The problem comes in the skimming arena. And one of the things that Brian and Bonnie put in, one of the recommendations, relates to an accounting where we can actually determine how many children are supposed to be participating and comparing that with the ones that are participating. And then we have some kind of assurance that we're getting the money for those that are participating. This is the major problem. This is where we don't know what we're missing. We're missing nothing, but it's a ripe opportunity to skim, and some of the recommendations that are in here address that. And so I think that this needs to happen, because we've got to figure out what money the city is actually owed, and then we need to make sure that it gets where it belongs. But right now, there's not. It's difficult. Our city employees, the rec leaders that are out supervising these sites, if they're not there, they don't know how many children are there and how much is being collected. So some of the things that we've recommended should act for tools for leisure services to better follow that. That, to me, the skimming is the most frightening thing, because we just don't know what it is.
How many kids on an average do you have at one school between, let's say, 2 o'clock and 10 o'clock? Any idea?
2 o'clock and 10 o'clock?
Yeah, how long do you close it? Do they last till 6 or 8 or?
We are open until 6:30.
Okay, from
2 until 6:30.
There you go. How many kids on an average?
On an average, probably about 25, 30 kids per
And
site.
per site, yes. And how much do you charge each kid?
It's $4 in the morning, 5 in the afternoon. It's very inexpensive.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because you know what I was thinking? If people just don't have the funds, and it's already open, why would we charge? I mean, it's for the community. We're doing something good to get these kids out and give them something to do at night, which I love that alone. Why would we even bother to charge them? I mean, let the employees just go ahead and we pay them out of the other fund, because the kids are the kids. Open the door, we should supervise. But you probably heard this before, so I'm sorry. I apologize.
Mr. Chairman, I think people should understand what safety really is all about, and I mean, it's really a convenience for parents who have difficult work schedules.
Right.
And I mean, if you have to be to work at prior to school starting, I mean, that's why it's 5 and up, because I mean, you couldn't take children under 5, because it's really not that type of nursery. But
Again, I would state for the record, Barbara Jackson, that I agree wholeheartedly with what Rand has said. We do need to know what we don't know. I will say, though, that this is endemic in the entire valley. All of the safety entities have the same struggle, because they are so dispersed. We are now at 68 centers.
Mr. Sen. Just to piggyback on what you said, I agree with you. I talked, when we began this audit, I talked to the county auditor, and of course the county has, for the county sites, they have virtually the same situation. And he was very interested in finding out what this report said, because whatever his statement to me was, whatever you find, I'm probably dealing with also. So I think it's across the valley.
Before you share the results with them, tell them to get off the dime on Metro.
Yeah, I will. I'll hold it hostage.
We sure enough hard work.
Any additional discussion on the report? Is there a motion for both reports?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. If there's any citizen participation, you're welcome to step up, identify yourself, limit your discussion time, or do we have
Did you miss
another
number
agenda
11?
item?
We have one more.
You know what? I apologize. Let's go to number 11. Audit of Financial Services Grant Fiscal Administration. We'll hear from the city auditor. No, I'm not in a hurry to get out of here.
Nancy Beatty will report on the work done related to this particular project.
The city auditor's office completed a performance audit of financial services grant fiscal administration. The grant fiscal administration division of the Department of Finance and Business Services provides grant fiscal oversight and year-end revenue reporting. The duties include the timely submittal of reimbursement requests to the awarding agencies, financial document review, reconciliation of revenue and expenditures, submittal of annual grant budget, and the preparation of a schedule of federal awards. Our objective in completing this audit was to ensure that adequate policies, procedures, and practices are in place for the fiscal monitoring of grant awards. The scope of the audit was limited to the judgmentally selecting grant awards from the fiscal year 2005 to 2006 master grant schedule. Our audit found that the Department of Finance and Business Services provides adequate oversight for grant awards. In completing the audit, we did note that federal guidelines include provisions for reimbursement of both direct and indirect costs associated with federal grants. Currently, the city only requests reimbursement for the direct cost. Before indirect costs can be allocated, an indirect cost rate proposal must be completed and approved. This requires a commitment of agency resources. In completing this audit, we contacted 8 local government agencies that had approved indirect cost allocation plans. These agencies indicated that the number one benefit for allocating both the direct and the indirect cost is the ability to determine the full cost associated with accepting grant awards. 7 of these agencies also indicated they use the indirect cost rates as a tool to allocate indirect costs for purposes other than federal grants.
Do we have any discussions and comments on this report? I notice that the date for completion is recommended to be 2008. Mr. Vincent.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mark Vincent again. Couple of thoughts. I concur with the recommendations in the sense that we need to know what the total cost of the grant programs are. The problem that we struggle with is, in terms of dollars, we don't get a lot of grant money. And obviously, the more we allocate in terms of overhead, the less money there is for direct programs. So one of the discussions I had, I think Rad might have participated in this discussion, was we can still track the cost of the administration, all the indirect costs that go to the administration of the grant program, without necessarily diverting direct dollars away from the programs. And that's what we're looking at perhaps implementing for fiscal year 2008 as an accounting solution, cost accounting solution to keep track of what are the indirect costs associated with the administration of the program, so you know what the full costs are. Perhaps after we identify those, then the city manager's office could decide if they want to begin to charge those overhead costs directly to the grant programs after we go through the required process of notifying the agency, the federal agency, of our cost accounting standards and our allocation process. But my sense is we probably won't. My sense is we'll probably identify those costs and track them and not necessarily charge them directly to the grants.
At the time of the grant submission, do the grants permit indirect costs?
Most of them do. I think practically all of them do. But it becomes a matter of you're going to have to, under since the grants are typically federal grants, you're going to have to comply with government cost accounting standards in terms of how you allocate those costs. From my old days at the test site, that's something I know quite a bit about, and so it's a matter of making the proper application, the proper notice, and then doing it. We can do that, though, immediately in terms of our accounting structure. We can track it without actually charging it for the grant. And that's my recommendation to the city manager's office that that's what we do, that we actually track our indirect costs without charging it to the grant, so we can monitor and see what those are.
Do the grants permit an increase for the indirect costs?
Typically, no.
Okay.
And that's the problem. It's a zero-sum game. So the thought is, well, if you can save some of your general fund money by getting general fund recovery for some of those costs, then you can use some of your general fund money to subsidize the program, and then so you have to ask yourself the question, why do it to begin with? You know, why make the allocation to begin with? It's a zero-sum game. Why bother? But it is important. I agree. It's very important to know what the total administration costs of the grants are. You need to know that.
So the purpose behind this thing is cost tracking, but not to dilute the funds otherwise going to the programs for which the grants have been sought.
We may discover that certain programs have higher overhead than others, and that may affect our decision about whether we accept those grants. But without that information, you can't make an informed decision.
Mr. Snell, any further comment?
The only thing I would mention is that in a previous job, I was responsible for grant accounting at Wichita Public Schools. And, there were a number of grants, at least at that time, which has been a few years ago, where there were almost two requests that you made, and one didn't draw down the grant funds. It was the overhead was charged under a different sum, and it didn't reduce the actual grant funds. That if that was the case, I'm sure that
Right.
Mark would make that, or the finance department would bill for that. But apparently times have changed. Now they want their overhead taken out of the total grant, and that doesn't make sense to limit ourselves on what we can do if it's economically feasible to do the grant. So.
Any further comment? Is there a motion?
One more thing I want to add is I think that they do an excellent job. Finance department does an excellent job on this particular issue. We found them to be very thorough in what they were doing and had everything quite well in hand.
Well,
It's a good audit.
I would like to suggest they do an excellent job overall as well, and not just on this one program.
Well, usually we beat them to death on Sunday. I'm just trying to.
All right, well,
this one
I
turned
just
out
want the
well.
record to reflect that the Brad's comments about the grant administration really a reflection of Patty Brugans' efforts.
Excellent.
Really the heart and soul of our grant fiscal activity.
Now, I have the misfortune of doing a variety of things in my life, and one of which is speaking to my peers on occasion. And not too long ago, I spoke to my peers with respect to what it's like to, under GASB, and to be on a committee, to be on a board for a governmental unit. And I use the city of Las Vegas as an example, because one of the others that I'm going to put that on the record. Anyhow, but I use the city of Las Vegas as a true example of what can be done, how controls can be implemented, and how departments can work together. And there were issues that and there were about 110 people that were there as I was facilitating. And it's amazing what some of the other smaller municipalities are not doing compared to what we've accomplished, what this city has accomplished. And it's a compliment once again to everybody that's here. And as I listen to some of the feedback that I've received, they don't have an internal auditor per se. They just have a person that does internal control checks, but no supervision, no internal control, no similar committee as to what we have here. They don't have the Mark Bensons or the Steve Hopkins of the world that are near the Betsy's of the world, so to speak, and it creates mass confusion for them. So it's a true compliment to the city, what's happening. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
Moved in second, all in favor?
Aye.
Okay.
Chairman, just a quick commenting before the members of the media that are here. Are they here? And that's to be expected. This is not only good news. It's, as you say, Mr. Chairman, it's great news. And I certainly thank the members of this committee, our private sector members, for sharing your time, But most of all, to thank staff, Brad and his team, and certainly the departments, because without that interaction, we wouldn't have the numbers that are before us today in a relatively short period of time, considering we went from ground zero to where we are today. And that's why the media isn't here, because this is the core of what government is constantly criticized in the media about: accountability and cleaning house and efficiencies and all the rest. So I just wanted to put that on the public record. And a question, if there's any way we can estimate with these numbers what kind of savings there are, perhaps in general terms as far as dollars, but also the savings as far as increased efficiencies and things like that. It may be impossible to do, but could your team think about that? I think that's part of the message that when we report out to City Council, that they should be aware of, that this isn't just an exercise in going into the departments and creating all this paper. It's result driven.
We did that, I think the first year I was here. We'll do that again. One thing I would say, which you obviously pointed out, is that there are some hard numbers you can look at, there's some soft numbers you can look at, and some things there are no numbers to. And the reason I usually try to stay away from that is because sometimes those areas that are intrinsic, that you can't put a number on, are some of the most important things we do, and so they shouldn't be not done because of that.
And I would not ask that you spend a lot of time, but if in just dialogue and just through your experience, I'd be interested in those three categories: the hard numbers, soft numbers, and the intrinsic value. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Any further comment from any members of the board? Any citizen participation? This meeting is adjourned. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Really disappointed.